He lost his family at 8, but by 14, he was leading a silent revolution the king couldn't see coming. This is the story of Abah Odugbe, the boy who fought without rage, ruled without a crown, and made tyrants fear the quiet. The silent uprising of Abah Odugbe of Barbradu. In the ancient land of Barbradu, where corn and wine is like the sand, and rivers carried stories to the sea, war had become a song of sorrow. Once a thriving domain of farmers, singers, and peaceful warriors, Barbradu had been reduced to cinders and silence. It began 6 years ago. The night the stars disappeared behind smoke, and screams became lullabies. Abah Odugbe, then just 8, was the only survivor of his village. He remembered everything, the blood-smeared face of his father shielding him behind a burning granary, the final breath of his mother whispering, "Run, my son," and the trembling hand of his sister pushing him through a crack in the forest wall. They died saving him. He lived, carrying a weight heavier than any sword. Now 14, Abah Odugbe roamed the edges of ruined territories, hiding in shadowed forests and caves once used by ancient hunters. The kingdoms around Barbradu had grown fat on blood. Warlords swallowed villages like morsels, and even babies were not spared. The people, stripped of courage and crushed by loss, submitted without resistance. The children of Ash. Now 14, Abah Odugbe lived not only for himself. As he wandered through scorched hamlets and abandoned farmlands, he began to find others like him, children smeared with soot and silence, survivors of the same terror that shattered his own world. Some were mute with shock, others limped from injury, and all of them carried the same haunted eyes. He did not pass them by. Abah Odugbe took them in, first a pair of brothers hiding in a collapsed yam barn, then a girl barely old enough to speak, clutching a rusted blade. He gave them names if they had none, and warmth when they had long forgotten it. They became his family. Together, they camped beneath broken statues and hollow trees. Abah Odugbe foraged by day and trained by night, teaching them to move like smoke, think like hunters, and hide in plain sight. To feed them, Abah Odugbe worked. He sought out the old, the wise, and the forgotten, elders who still told stories by the fire or brewed bitter herbs for healing. He fetched water for them, cleaned their compounds, listened to their songs, and asked no questions but remembered everything. In return, they fed him, not just food, but knowledge, stories of past rebellions, the weak points of the palace wall, and the hidden meanings of ancestral symbols. They called him Monj Nungwa, child of spirit, not just for his silence, but for the fire behind his quiet eyes. And yet, each night as he lay awake surrounded by his adopted siblings, Abah Odugbe still bore the invisible scar of his family's last screams. He had not wept in 6 years. He did not plan to start now. "I will not be the hero," he once whispered to the wind. "But I will be the hand that gives the next hero a sword." While others saw a child, he was becoming something else. A strategist, a shepherd of the broken, and the ghost that the invaders would one day fear in the dark. But Abah Odugbe watched. Abah Odugbe remembered. And Abah Odugbe began to see the pattern. The king's silence. The king of Barbradu, a man once praised as just and wise, had grown quiet as a grave. He sent no warriors to defend the villages but was swift to silence any who tried to fight back. His soldiers enforced peace, not by defending the people, but by breaking their will. When villagers managed to repel an invasion or capture a raider, they'd naively call the town crier to boast of their defiance. The very next day, the king's guard would arrive, not to praise them, but to punish them for rebellion. To many, the enemy wore no single face. But Abah Odugbe realized, the king was not only silent, he was complicit. The disguise of a prophet. One moonless night, Abah Odugbe painted his face with ash and wrapped his body in bark and cloth to look like an old wanderer. He walked into the market square, his back bent like time had aged him, and began to ask questions. What are we doing wrong? Why do we announce our strength before we even strike? Why trust our survival to those who do not bleed with us? People gathered, at first with suspicion, then with guilt. A widow spoke, her voice like gravel. We show our enemies our hearts before we draw our blades. A former hunter whispered, we fight for the king, but the king does not fight for us. Abah Odugbe's questions spread like wildfire, not loud, but quiet enough to escape detection, and deep enough to burn in men's hearts. Whispers turned to fire. Some villagers, inflamed with pain, planned to march on the palace and give the king a taste of the anguish they endured. But Abah Odugbe, wise beyond his years, opposed it. We do not win by screaming. We win by becoming what they fear, the unseen. He proposed a different path. Stop announcing resistance. Stop asking for permission to live. And so, the people began to fight back, in silence. No trumpets, no town criers, no declarations. They set traps under the cover of night. They poisoned wells used by the invaders. They guided raiding parties into false paths, leading them to cursed grounds known only to the locals. The invaders began to vanish. Their armor rusted overnight. Their horses fled. Their tents burned without a trace of fire. Something ancient had awakened. The web of deceit. But all victories have their shadows. One day, a masked warlord named Konu the Collector arrived at the palace, bearing a gift, a captured rebel. It was Abah Odugbe, bound and beaten. His disguise had faltered when a traitor, a boy his age jealous of Abah Odugbe's growing influence, gave him away. The king, old and paranoid, grinned. "So, this is the spark," he hissed, "let us snuff him." Konu raised his axe. But instead of striking, he knelt. "Your Majesty," Konu said, "I am not here to kill Abah Odugbe. I am here to serve him." Gasps echoed. Abah Odugbe looked up, blooded, bruised, and smiled. Because Konu the Collector was never a real warlord. He was a mask worn by Abah Odugbe's loyal companion, a warrior monk named Obadiah, trained in the hidden arts of deception and infiltration. Together, they had played a double game, luring the king's trust to get inside the palace. And now they had it. The fall of the false king. That night, the king's guard turned on each other. Obadiah had already planted spies, given them hope, and fed them truth. Within hours, the palace was overrun. But Abah Odugbe did not kill the king. He walked into the throne room, looked the trembling ruler in the eye, and said, "You didn't fail us by being weak. You failed us by pretending strength while making us helpless." Abah Odugbe ordered him exiled, blindfolded and barefoot, to wander the same ruins his people had endured. The people of Barbradu declared no new king. Instead, they built a council of fire, where every clan had a voice. The rise of the quiet flame. Abah Odugbe, still just a boy, became a symbol, not a ruler, but a guide. He trained others to think before they speak, to strike before they are seen, and to keep their weapons in their hearts until it was time. The enemies still came, but never with ease. And every time they did, they disappeared into the silence of the forest, never to return. They say now that Abah Odugbe walks with the war gods, that he was touched by the spirits of the dead, guided by the voices of his mother and sister, who still whisper in the wind. Keep running. But now, make them run from you. Thank you for listening to the story of Abah Odugbe. If it moved you, inspired you, or made you think, don't keep it to yourself. Share it. Subscribe. Leave a comment and tell us what quiet strength looks like in your world. We're building a community of listeners who believe stories can heal, teach, and transform. Be part of it. Every like, every share, helps keep these voices alive. And remember, even in silence, a revolution can rise.